Hi, folks. Shawn Dostie here, the charity ambassador, and I am bringing to you America's Fundraiser podcast. I think this is episode 10. I have today with me a guest that I have followed for a long time, and we've never actually met in person, but she is a mentor to me. And after following her on YouTube, I have noticed how strong of an individual, how good of a professional she is in this particular industry. And I'd like to introduce her to you now. Her name is Abra Annes. Abra, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And welcome to the
Absolutely.
show.
Thank you, Shawn. I've been in the fundraising business for 15 years, and I've been a professional benefit fundraising auctioneer for about the past 10. I live in Florida. I've got 4 kids, husband, and I do in my heyday, which has passed, I did about 100 events a year, and now I only take about 40 clients a year. I travel all around the country, and I absolutely love helping nonprofits raise more money.
100 events a year. That is crazy. I mean, you spent your life in airports.
It was nuts. A lot of it was in the Bay Area, but I have a family. That's my priority, and I just can't leave them. When in the business, you got to get there 2 hours before. So that means you're there at 4 for an event that starts at 6. Plus, I lived an hour away. So that means I had to leave at 3. And I didn't get home till midnight. And that just wasn't sustainable for me. So now I choose 40 organizations that are really, I can get behind their work. I can understand their work, and I can sell their work to their audience.
Absolutely. Now, what was your inspiration? What got you into the fundraising? When people hear you say you're a fundraising auctioneer, that's different. There's not a lot of people that do it. And it's just something fascinating, because when people think auctioneer, they're thinking fast talking, they're thinking farm sales, they're thinking real estate, they're thinking personal property. When you think fundraising, well,
It's a little different. I'm going to tell you the short version. I raced my way through college, and I graduated in 3 years, and I got a job, a regular 9 to 5 in an office, and I wasn't happy. I was like, what did I waste this year of hanging out and parties and sleeping late for? Like, I messed up. And so I had worked for this company. I had interned them all through my college years, and I told them, I need a break. Give me 8 weeks for the summer. And monster.com, which is a job hunting
uh-huh.
website, had just launched. And I was bored at work one day, and I was searching on Monster for these skills that I have. And it came up, work on a cruise ship. So I submitted my resume. They called me the next day, and I went to my boss. I said, I'll be gone for 8 weeks. I'll be gone for the summer. He said, we'll save your job. I packed my bags, and I went, got on this cruise ship, didn't come back for like 3 years, not literally, but basically. And when I was done working on the cruise ship, I didn't have any real life skills, and I couldn't get a job. And there was an organization, a Jewish nonprofit in Minneapolis, I happen to be Jewish, that took a chance on me. And it turned out I was really good at fundraising. And so I took some of my entertainment skills and I used them in fundraising. And then I had moved to San Francisco to take another nonprofit job. And in about 5 years into actual fundraising for a nonprofit, I went to a gala. I was 28. I had never been to a gala before. I saw a fundraising auctioneer who was a volunteer. He was terrible, but he did a good, decent job. He was not very good, to be honest. He was terrible. And I turned to my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, and I said, I can't believe this is a job. I can do all of these things. I can entertain, I can ask people for money, and I can sell things. I need this job. So I called all the auctioneers in the Bay Area at the time who were big. At the time, there were 3. And all of them said, come work for us. And I chose the one I thought was the best fit for me, and I worked for him for a couple of years, and then I went out on my own.
Fantastic. That is the short version. That's not as long as or as short as I was expecting.
No, it's there's lots of little ups and downs with it.
But I want to backtrack a little bit. You said something. You came back from the cruise ship, didn't have any, what you said, didn't think you had any life skills or job skills that translated, and you got a job with a nonprofit. Now, I've been an auctioneer since 2012. I kind of know how we look at the industry, but you said you were good at fundraising. Now, being good at fundraising in a nonprofit is completely different than being good at fundraising as an auctioneer. I'm imagining. I don't know because I haven't been in that side. Can you explain? Because what I'm trying to do with this podcast is I'm trying to get a feel, an education, trying to learn what it's like from the other side. I feel to be successful for all of us, nonprofits, auctioneers, and bringing them together, that we have to understand each other. So can you explain to me what it takes to be a good fundraiser for a nonprofit?
Absolutely. I will do my best. I could talk for an hour just on this, but I will do my best. I think it is much easier to ask for money from stage as an auctioneer than it is to work in the nonprofit, to fundraise one-on-one, which is how the majority of fundraising is done in large nonprofits with major donors.
Did you say it's easier face-to-face or on the phone with donors, or it's easier on stage?
Much easier on stage.
I think that's important for both sides to know.
It's 100 times easier. And I think, for better or worse, that's one of the reasons why nonprofits have galas, because it's easier to hire someone else to ask for the money for you. Now, when I went to work at a nonprofit, I didn't know anything about fundraising, and I didn't know anything about organizations. And I have a YouTube video, it's like has maybe 30 views, about a speech I gave to a group of young nonprofit professionals about what it really takes to be successful in fundraising. And let me break it down for your watchers, your listeners. When you fundraise at a nonprofit, there's like 3 types of fundraising. There's peer-to-peer, which is I call you, my friend, and ask you for money. There is the nonprofit to the donor. Typically, that's the major donors. Most nonprofits only meet with donors over a certain level. Some nonprofits, it's $500. Some of them, it's $10,000. They won't meet with anyone who doesn't give less than $10,000. And then there's like direct mail and direct email. And those are all different types of fundraising. But what I was trained to do is call you, Shawn, ask you out to lunch, and tell you about the work that we're doing, reignite your passion, reignite your excitement, get you to re-fall in love with the work that we did, that we have done. And if you were a previous donor, ask you to renew your gift and make the donation again. And if you were a new donor, ask you to make a first-time gift. So this model, the way it sounds to somebody who hasn't sat, it's called a solicitation. It sounds like public radio. It sounds like I'm asking you to join me, but instead of the public radio host asking thousands of listeners, you're doing that one-on-one. And it is very intimate, and it is very personal, and it is filled with pressure. There's a lot of scary moments, like what if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to? Or how do I know what they're passionate about? Or what if I ask them for too much money? What if I ask them for too little money? What if they say no? What if they say not right now? Right? There's all these things that come up, and it's a conversation. And really what fundraising is about is one person giving to another person who asked. Like, if I could boil it down as simply, like that's as simple as it gets. And in what we do, it's very easy. I get on stage, people are primed, ready to go. And if it all works out right, if the equation is right, we raise a lot of money and people raise their hands or their paddles.
So
But
I was talking with somebody in the industry. I'm sorry, I did not mean to interrupt.
no, go ahead.
I was talking to someone in the industry a few days ago, and she said, and this is a specific market, she said that the area seems to be going away from live auctions. And I'm trying to quote this as close as possible. She said, it's because of our donors. You have to follow what our donors saying, and our donors are getting auction fatigue. They feel like they're being nickeled and dimed. And I'm like, gosh. And then she proceeds to tell me about the last auctioneer that she had that was a person that she thought had done farm auctions before, because that auctioneer wanted to start the fund a need low and go high.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I guess your donors might feel there's so many different gray areas in that statement that she told me a couple of days ago, and it's like, oh my gosh, is that the state? And this is a major market. This is not a small market.
Okay, so I don't believe that, in the sense that auctions are going away because people are tired of buying things. And this is for your audience out there. I am like a renegade auctioneer. Like, I do not do what the National Auctioneers Association tells me. I don't have like 9 million auctioneer friends. I like do my own thing in my own little corner of the world. So my opinions are my own. They are also very unpopular with auctioneers. They are very popular with nonprofits because they come from a place of data and logic and reasoning and, frankly, expertise. Like, I worked in a nonprofit. The other piece that I didn't mention is I sit on the board of numerous nonprofits, and I'm a donor myself. So a few times a year, somebody sits me down for coffee or lunch or whatever, sushi, and asks me for money.
Oh, you
and
eat raw fish?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's nasty.
I'm from California. We eat it for breakfast. I think that the person you talk to is correct that traditional live auction items may not be selling as well. However, the bigger picture is, in my opinion, I don't really understand live auctions in general, the way they've been done historically. Well, let me back up for a second. I personally don't believe that any nonprofit should be in a philanthropic relationship with somebody 364 days a year. And then on one day a year, they're in a transactional relationship where, in response to their money that they donate, they get something. Because I personally believe that trains your donors to just keep wanting to do transactions with your nonprofit. And transactions are not sustainable. Transactions do lead to fatigue. However, live auction items that relate to your mission, that are specific and unique to you as a nonprofit, those things are selling like crazy. So it's too big of a statement to say that live auctions are going away. I would say yes, a lot of donors do not need to travel to France or the Masters or to Vegas anymore. They're not interested. That is true. But that shouldn't have been the things we were selling them in the first place. That's the first thing I noticed when I became an auctioneer is, what are all these stupid things we're selling to your donors? It's so stupid. So with my clients, we focus very hard on coming up with what are things you can't duplicate and that benefit the nonprofit in general. So for example, like, I used to work with it's not really a zoo, but it had animals. It was like a children's museum with animals in San Francisco area. And one of their hottest sellers in the auction every year was name a baby animal. It was name a baby tortoise, name a baby duck, like, and
naming rights are big.
Yeah, and you would have 3 or 4, but that is something that you could return to the organization, see your donation, see your dollars at work, essentially. So that's my opinion. I also really like a small auction. Of my other opinion that people don't love, I like a small auction. But I
Well,
think
auction
that
how?
I won't do any more than, I say 6, but I think that 5 is the max. Now, I'm going to put a caveat on that, a little asterisk up in the corner. The typical clients that I work with, this is all based on the category of nonprofit you're working with. I typically work with mid to large size nonprofits that are typically raising $250,000 or more and are ready to go to the next level, which for me is reaching that $500,000 mark.
Okay.
For the auctions that raise like $70,000, I think live auctions are going to stick around for a long time. And I think that having a transactional relationship is your only choice at your gala, because you have to maximize the money in the room that night. But
Now,
once you go, you have to shed that.
Now the $70,000 auctions. Now, would you be more of a proponent of the 10 or 12 items, or would you be more a proponent of the 5, or would you be more the proponent of 100?
I think it really depends on your audience. I love looking at your historical data for your event. I don't care if it's on a spreadsheet or with one of these fancy auction softwares. Like, I don't care. I just need to see the numbers. I think it really depends. And I don't think I can make a very fair and honest blanket statement about them. I think that if in certain markets, people like to buy, and people like to buy things. And if that happens to be your market, stick with what's working, but I'm a big proponent of trying things. Try mixing in something new. Try mixing in a syndicate auction item. Try to mix in, and a syndicate auction item is where multiple people buy one auction item. So for example, I have a dinner party at my house. I have 30 spots. I sell each spot for $150. I think those are different ways. The real important factor to think about when you're trying to figure out how many auction items is, in every gala, I don't care, crab feed, whatever you're having, barn dance, there are only 10 to 20 couples who bid. That's it.
Sure.
So everyone else is just watching. So you have to really think about, am I willing to alienate 95% of my audience for this 10%? And for many nonprofits, the answer is no. I'm willing to only alienate them for 5 items rather than 10 or 12 or 20, which is just excruciating.
So
And
4 or 5 items could be inspirational, whereas 10 or 12 could be, honey, it's time to tell the babysitter we're on the way.
it depends really on the nonprofit.
Sure.
Most of my clients have between 5 and 8 items, and I won't do more than 8. That is my hard and fast line. Like, I'll be like, sorry, take one out or hire someone else. Unfortunately, I just can't do it.
Now,
That's me.
That's fine. Can you guys see why I love this lady? She's very strong, has very, very strong opinions, but
I do.
her opinions are backed up. I mean, she can back up, the lady can back up what she says. I have every bit of respect for that. Couple of different questions I had. So being the alienation of people that cannot participate,
Yeah.
or don't participate. So I'm a proponent of keeping them engaged. So there's 2 different ways. There's the revenue enhancers, which again, we don't want to get too many of them because we don't want them to feel nickel and dimed, but we want to get participation from everybody that's in the room. The other one is the fund to need, or the cash appeal, the special appeal. You've done this now coast to coast, and you probably have before because you fly back and forth, but even geographically where you're placed, how big of a proponent are you of perhaps mixing that up? And I know it depends on the event, But it seems to me that, and I'm saying this as an auctioneer that's done it the old-fashioned way, that we've had the dinner, we have the live auction, we close the silent auction or somewhere in that area, and then we finish up with the live appeal and maybe a last hero or run around, whatever, to close the event. But I have been hearing and I've been thinking about changing that up and perhaps putting the fund a need before the live auction so you can get the participation before those people are tired of the event and want to go home, and before they've left the arena, so to speak.
Absolutely. I think it really depends on your numbers. If you have a strong live and it's working for you, I would keep it. But there are auctions, there are events where people leave. They just get up and go to the bar, or they leave. And when it comes time for the paddle raise, the fund a need, down here they call it the cash call, which I hate that name. I'm going to change it in Florida. There's no
Sounds
one
like a
left.
cattle call.
There's just no one left in the room. I like to do the fund a need first. That is my personal favorite. If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have told you it'll never work. And then I had a client who swore it worked for their audience, and I fell in love with it. I think the two best places for a fund a need are before the live or after the live. What I really don't like is in the middle of the live. I think that just messes with the whole flow and vibe of the live, and plus the item right after the fund a need always sucks. It never sells. So basically, if you have 10 auction items, you're going to have one that doesn't sell, and then that donor gets messed up or pissed off. So I'm a huge fan of the fund a need. If you're not doing the fund a need, I think you're making a big mistake, and you should try it out, because it engages the 90% of the room who isn't bidding in the live. Now, I think going back to what we talked about earlier is what we're seeing. The person you talked to who said live auctions are going away, I would say yes, but they're transitioning them to bigger and better fund a needs, because that is the best bang for your buck in terms of time and effort and staff time that you can spend in your gala, in my personal opinion.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. If you do a lot of events are not doing a live auction, they're just doing the fund a need itself. Maybe some revenue enhancements or some raffles or things like that. But as an auctioneer, as a nonprofit looks and says, we're not doing a live auction this year. We're just going to do a fund a need. Well, we've always said that the auctioneers, as professionals, we know how to spot different things in the room, and we are professional auctioneers. And that's why you should choose a professional that doesn't beat up on your customer or on your donors, and gives them the effect, the experience. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. But now, if you take the auction aspect out of it and you want your auctioneer to, you have no idea where I'm going with this, but you ask the auctioneer to do the fund a need, fees come to mind. And this is not I'm asking you because you're a renegade. I'm the black sheep as well. I think that's why I identify with you. Why should a nonprofit, or maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't, I don't know the answer to this, but should a nonprofit pay an auctioneer the same fees to just conduct a perfect fund a need versus a live auction and a fund a need? Or can you get your radio personality, your TV personality, your weatherman, your sports star to ask the same questions?
Great question. Okay, I think we have to, number one, do not, under any circumstances, take away your live auction and go from 10 items to 0 items and think it'll work out great. It will not. You have to go from 10 to 8 to 5 to 2, and then maybe transition to only a fund a need.
Okay.
Or Or if you've never done an event before, then you could try the fund and eat only model. But I have seen horrible failures. Audiences and people, they really like the routine and they get used to it. And it's the same people there every year. It's the same donors. They're not changing. And so you have to gradually work up to that level. Okay, now to get to the fees, in my opinion, that transition process is a very delicate process. And I would definitely hire someone like, and trust, and who you know has the expertise to get you from point A to point C. Nonprofits are notoriously slow at making decisions and making things happen. And sometimes they just need an outside force to help them. So that's number one. So if you're thinking about hiring somebody. Number two, if you are skilled at fundraising, which is different than auctioneering, right? You should not hire your local cattle auctioneer to do your fund and need. That also will not turn out well. So I think we have to be careful with terms here. I think that if you are good at fundraising and inspiring people to spend a lot of money on things they do not need and do not want, and you know how to lead a fund and need effectively, which by the way is not all auctioneers. I watch everybody's YouTube videos. People say I'm mean because I criticize. I'd say 50 to 60% of the auctioneers, in my opinion, do not lead an inspiring fund and need. I always think, would I donate to that guy? And the answer is no. Or that lady, whoever. And so I think you have to find the person. Whether that person has skills as an auctioneer or an MC, the skill remains the same. You are paying them to facilitate live fundraising. So for me, I'll just be very honest, I charge a flat fee. I don't care if you have me MC, auction, close the silent, do the fund and need, and pull the raffles. I'm there. What else have I got to do?
Sure.
But there are people who say, this is my fee for the live and this is my fee for the fund and need. That I don't understand. You're literally 20 feet away. What can't you do? That I don't understand. But I do think as a nonprofit, it is worth the money and the investment. Unless your other option is, I think if your choice is auto auctioneer or cattle auctioneer, nothing against those, but they don't know how to fundraise. It's a very different skill, just like I don't know how to sell cattle. And so if your choice is, my first choice, if you can't hire a professional fundraising auctioneer or fundraiser, is to have a member of your staff do it. That's my first choice, not the local TV guy, because it has to feel compelling. It has to feel honest. It has to feel
authentic.
Truthful and authentic. Absolutely. And I don't think that the local weather guy can do it, in my opinion. They're all going to come for me now, but that's okay.
No, well, I actually appreciate that, choosing a staff member over a professional auctioneer that is not versed in fundraising. It's so true. I mean, it's perfect. Now, I'm going to this is a moment of truth. I know that you've looked at some of my content because you've made comments about needing a at the time you said I needed a it was the picture at the very beginning that tells I can't even think of the word for it now, so I know a thumbnail. Yes, look, I'm 57 years old. The internet didn't exist when I was a kid, oh hush, you're not that old. So what did you think of my particular have you seen one of my fund and needs? I have one out there.
You have. I think the one that I've seen the most is the runaround game. And I think you did a good job.
Well, thanks. I actually don't call it the runaround any longer. I call it the last hero, but same difference.
The last hero. Sorry, the last hero.
No. That's I think it, with the one that you watched, I think it was titled the runaround.
I think it was, because that's what I looked for. What did I think? I don't
like that name.
I don't either. I haven't watched any of them. this month. And by the way, I can't even, excuse me, remember what happened like last week. My kids went to school this morning, like first day school. So like
First,
maybe,
wait a minute.
maybe my
It's
brain,
August 11th.
yeah, that's Florida.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think more than anything, the number one piece of advice I could give to auctioneers is go volunteer at a nonprofit and understand how nonprofit employees think and also how they speak. There is a whole lexicon of language that I use that most fundraising auctioneers and most auctioneers in general do not know. And so it immediately gives me credibility that other people do not have or can't. It's not impossible to get or to learn. You could teach it all to yourself, but you're really serving your clients' needs and helping the nonprofit do what they do. So I think the number one thing I would tell people, including you, even though I haven't watched your video, I remember the runaround was long. I think it was like 16 minutes. I think I clocked
It was extremely long.
Yeah, I think I clocked it. And that's one of my issues with that game in general. Not that it doesn't work, but it takes so much time. I think you and I serve potentially different populations. And I'm not here to criticize what works in like where you live, but things that work in, for example, the middle of the country, in your school fundraiser in the gym, do not work where I live and do not work in California. People just, it's a different vibe and a different type of people. I think most auctioneers don't know what their clients do. And if you don't know what they do, you cannot tell. And if you don't know what your clients do for work and why it's important, then you shouldn't be fundraising for them, in my opinion.
Okay. I think that's a fair and very blunt point, and I love it. That's why I've wanted
But that's
to
why I'm the renegade. That's why.
So I belong in a group, and I belong in a lot of groups. I am the antithesis of being off by myself and not knowing thousands of auctioneers. I do know thousands of auctioneers across the country. I'm a strong NAA proponent. Not that I hold anything against not being a member of the NAA, because I know a lot of auctioneers that don't belong to the NAA and don't belong to any organization. And from a previous lifetime, when I was on the board of directors of the Ohio Independent Auto Dealers Association, I was like pulling teeth to get me on that board and to get me involved. I didn't want to be a part of any organization. All they were after was to take your money and stand out in front of you. And anyhow, that's a whole completely different conversation. But the question was asked, does anybody have a white paper? Does anybody have any video? Does anybody have a response to, do free auctioneers in the fundraising industry hurt the industry? Now, before you answer, I had come along with a bunch of cattle, ag, real estate, personal property auctioneers that are of the belief that a nonprofit is giving back to their community and that they should donate their time, or there's the people that charge $300, $400, whatever, a minimal amount to do that. And they don't think that they're hurting the industry or hurting the nonprofit. But then you have like the auctioneer that I referenced earlier that wanted to start a fund a need at the lower numbers and go their way up. And it's like, you can hurt people's feelings. So, and I don't mean it just
No, I can't.
like that, but it's like,
I have no
I
shame.
get phone calls like crazy if I do the castigation. So it's your turn. How, and I know it depends on the event, whether it's a small event or whether it's a large event, and depending on what it is. So there you have the parameters of the next conversation.
Do I think that volunteer auctioneers, or you mean auctioneers who donate their time because they're cattle auctioneers and they're free? Like, which is the question?
Do free auctioneers hurt nonprofits? Let's just start with that.
No, I don't believe that. Okay. I don't, because I work for free all the time. There are organizations that I'm involved with, and I do their auctioneer, their fundraising for free. Like, just because I'm involved, I care whether it's my kid's school. I don't think that matters. I think what people are really afraid of, and this is also why I'm like out in my own little corner of the world of auctioneering. I think that the auctioneering world is growing at a much more rapid pace than people expected it to grow. And there are all these people trying to break in. Nonprofits are very savvy. And if your nonprofit, or if you lose business to a nonprofit that wants to go with an unknown who wants to volunteer, let them have at it. They obviously do not understand the benefit of hiring a trained professional. Now, let me tell you a secret about nonprofits. Let me tell you a huge secret that no one knows. And I'm also going to get a lot of flack for this. Nonprofits waste a ton of money. They have buckets of money that they waste on rebranding, new websites, on bringing in a fancy consultant that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there is always money there, in my opinion. But if they don't want to invest in you and your service, more power to them. Like, go do your own thing. I wish you luck. I don't think it'll work. I hope it does. And when you're ready, call me. That's my opinion. But I do not think it hurts the industry. What I do think it does is give some auctioneers a bad name. I think it hurts our reputation. But I find that the more I get a lot of calls from nonprofits who want to hire me, then they hear my price, they don't want to pay, so they get somebody free. They are always my best clients because they come back, they know they made a mistake, and they listen. And that's okay with me. So no, I don't think I don't think it affects the industry personally. However, I will also say I lived in a ginormous market. I live in a ginormous market now. If you live in a smaller market, could it hurt you? Possibly, but I don't know.
All right. I wanted to ask, I've written down some, what's that?
Or no? Was that the answer you're expecting, or no?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
But it was enlightening, and it was enlightening. I did not expect that at all. I expected a diatribe in the other direction, but that's why I love doing these, because I get different perspectives from different professionals, and there is no wrong answer per se. I mean, because there are different nonprofits. There's nonprofits of different sizes. Like you said, the difference between some of the events, or most of the events that you do, and the school events that I do, well, they're worlds apart. Not even the same, but some of the same principles apply. And no pun intended. I did not mean principles. Wanted to talk a little bit about the main reason that I've got this podcast going together is trying to bring nonprofits and their thought processes and auctioneers and their thought processes together to collaborate and cause great progress, to cause greater things to happen. I have the ultimate respect for nonprofit organizations and the people that start them. I've started a half a dozen small businesses in my life. To think of an individual or a group that feels so passionate about something that doesn't make money, that needs constant funding, that makes you go beg, borrow, and beg some more for money from well-heeled individuals or well-heeled corporations, is just absolutely fascinating and inspiring and motivational. And then when you see, I have a friend of mine that has worked for an organization, and his first couple of years, he didn't know if he was doing well or not doing well. And they came up to him after an event and said, do you understand that with the extra money that you raised tonight, that we can grant another 45 wishes? And that is so impactful, so huge. But what can we do to bring us together? What you said earlier about calling Mr. Donor on the phone or saying, let me take you to lunch, when he knows or she knows darn well that you're going to be asking for a check at that lunch. I don't know that I could do, I might be good at it, might not, but I can't imagine sitting there. I hate to get on the phone. But whereas being on stage, I love being on stage. I love being able to not point, but to put that palm up and ask for the money. And it's so gratifying and inspirational when they say yes, and you can feel the energy pull up in the. Can you tell a difference in the way I'm even talking about getting on the phone versus being on stage? So what can we do to bring those two together in a collaborative crescendo?
That I don't even know. That's a great question. Nonprofits are too busy to ever, this is going to sound horrible, they will never learn what we do or how our process works. Maybe a little bit, but a lot of them hire like event planners to take this off their plate. I think the number one thing that auctioneers can do to get better is make donations, small ones, doesn't matter, 10 bucks, $5. And when you get your donor appreciation letters, study the language they use, study the how they thank you. If you get a call, really listen to it. And then I would, if I was starting out and I didn't know anything about nonprofits, I would volunteer at a few. And I would say, how can I help with fundraising? I want to learn, or even ask if you could shadow for a day or two. It's incredibly enlightening to understand what happens at donor meetings, what happens at board meetings, how the money gets allocated. That means how the money gets given out. I think, when I was first starting out auctioneering, my boss told me, every time you're in the car going anywhere, practice your 100s, your 250s, your 500s, and your 1000s. Okay. So for years, I still do it sometimes when I'm bored. I wish more auctioneers practiced talking about their organization cold. Like for example, I think the first question that should be asked when you're on the phone with a new client, that they should ask you, what do you know about our organization? Because I hate these meetings when they're like, let me tell you about us. I'm like, well, don't you want to know if I did any research? Don't you want to know if I could tell you about your organization? You have this backwards. And I don't want to be rude in the first call, but sometimes I'll send a message afterwards and be like, hey, in further conversations, you're better off asking the auctioneer, because you're asking them that's what they're going to do for you on stage. That's what I think. Like, you need to know why it's important. And I think a lot of people just use it for the kids, or let's beat cancer. Like, that is not enough to inspire donors. You have to really dig down to the why. And I'm going to add one more point to this. I know I go on and on. When I consult with my clients, I spend an entire session. One entire session is purely devoted to language and understanding your organization. Like, I will sit there and quiz your development director and your executive director. Why is this important? Why does this matter? Like, I need to know. And okay, if you can't explain it, how am I supposed to explain it? And I want to make sure I say things the way that you say things, so it sounds authentic.
So it sounds authentic. I think that is so important. And it's something you're rarely, if ever, going to get if you get somebody that is not at least a part-time fundraising auctioneer, somebody that has a passion, that has attained some sort of education, that has tried to put themselves in that situation, rather than I said I would do that for you guys Friday night. Here I am. Sorry, I'm late. I just got done. The auto auction ran a little bit late today. Here. here I be. What do you need me to do?
Exactly. My biggest competition when I lived in Sonoma County was this guy, I won't say his name, but he was like a low-level politician at the time, like county level or something.
Uh-huh.
He did it for free to get votes. I get it, meet people, meet the big donors for his campaign. And he showed up 20 minutes, you handed him the papers and you hoped he got it right.
And you handed him the microphone of the venue of wherever it was, whether they had 3 or 4 inch speakers in the ceiling or whatever.
You just,
Or
and so
worse yet, he'd bring his long ranger horn.
right. And so I just think that that's just a whole other type of, that is not the client that I want. I don't understand, and I say this to clients very honestly, how could you spend 6 months planning an event and then hand it over to some guy who didn't practice? He showed up 20 minutes beforehand. How could shouldn't he spend 6 months prepping too? No, that I never thought about that. But like, how could you, the hardest part is getting on stage and being the emissary, the ambassador for your nonprofit. That's the hardest part.
And that's actually why I chose the name the charity ambassador, because it's like anybody can sell stuff. That's
Absolutely.
transactional. And anybody can sell a package valued at $1,000 for $600. That doesn't take skill other than being able to double tongue and triple tongue, or be able to talk fast and do tongue twisters, and maybe recognize a few things. And I'm not putting people down, but us as a profession have already gotten a name of selling the junk. I want to know my organization. I want to know why. I love I love simple little things like the lucky line, the buy it now at overvalue, and that's in a silent auction. That's not even something that I'm involved with. I like the idea of arranging things so that they look nice and not crowding people around the table so that they disappear. I like being able to speak heart to heart to the people that are sitting in that room that know that they're there for a reason, and being able to share that not how much money you're going to give, but what the sum of money that you're going to give, how that translates into what it does for the organization and the people it helps. It's in sales speak, it is features versus it's benefits versus features.
Absolutely.
Nobody wants to know that your car has air conditioning. They want to know that when it's 95 degrees out, you're going to be nice and cool at 68.
Absolutely.
The same thing.
I will say this, another one of my renegade opinions. I don't believe in for $1,000 you can do X, Y, and Z. For $500 you can do blah blah blah.
Okay.
Again, it's this transaction mindset. I don't believe in the transaction mindset with donors. I think it has gotten us to a point, and you'd be surprised at how many nonprofits cannot push past the $250,000 mark. They just can't. And it is my opinion, and when I come in and consult, I say your donors are stuck in transaction mindset. They want to know what they're getting. And the example I give is my grandmother, 95, super philanthropic at this age, not for big bucks, but just gives to lots of organizations. And she will call up and say, where's the cow I bought from that farm in India? I want to see a picture. And when you're a nonprofit employee, you do not have time to deal with 500s of my grandma. That'll take up your entire life. And that's a whole other separate arm of the nonprofit, is showing proof that your nonprofit works, like ROI. But when I do a fund in need, I believe in unrestricted funding, because what I know about nonprofits is that unrestricted funding is the #1 most underfunded funded budget line in the entire budget. There's a huge move in the nonprofit world to get to like donor focused funding where donors get to select what they give to. So like a great example is your local ASPCA. There's a lot of ladies who come in, they don't want to fund dogs, they only want to fund cats. And there's a lot of dog people who only want to fund dogs and not cats. But what nonprofits really need help with is keeping the lights on, buying the dog food, buying vaccines, paying the vet to come in the middle of the night when a dog is vomiting. Like it's all these, we call them the boring costs. They're not sexy, they're so boring, right? They need to replace the toilet, it's $700. Where are they gonna get $700? And the way a nonprofit budget works, which it's very different than a business, is you can't move money around. It is restricted to that it is restricted to that budget line because they are audited so much, and because nonprofit 501c3 is governed by another set of rules than businesses. And so you can't take a donation that is earmarked for dogs, even if you have a hole in your cat fund. You can't do that. Your dog fund may be overflowing and your cat fund may be empty. So it is my opinion, and I like to do an unrestricted fund need. Like I do not talk about a project. I do not talk about specific needs. What I will tell is stories about how the organization in its entirety helped the three-legged dog walk again. I'm making this up. But like that is an example of the work that we do. But I have been to far too many nonprofits who are like, they have to shut the doors because they don't have enough money to pay the staff or keep the lights on. So that's my renegade opinion.
No, and that's again, that's one of the reasons why I have you on here, because you have a completely different perspective than many people in the industry. I like that.
Right. But I also think that's because I think like a nonprofit executive.
Now,
I know what
how do you switch? You say that nonprofits, you have nonprofits that cannot get over the 250,000 mark.
Yes.
I have some that I can't get over the $100,000 mark. Why? And what specific steps can you take to get them out of transactional to philanthropic, and to get them from project driven, build the new gymnasium versus unrestricted funds? How do you bridge that gap, and how do you make that inspiring? That's two different questions. One is, how do you get the nonprofit on board to do what they're supposed to do? Or how do you teach the auctioneer to teach the organization that? And then how do you translate that on stage?
Okay. So at the end of every event, I do an event review for my clients about what I think worked well, the items I would get rid of, items I'd like to see next year, and I send it off to you. I'm like, and then we get on a call and we discuss it. But you should know from your auctioneer, like, this also drives me nuts about the auctioneer world. It's like, thank you for raising money, goodbye, and the end. I'll tell my clients, your sound system stunk, was terrible. Don't hire that guy again or I won't come back. Or I'll say, hey, we got to do more of this. Your crowd really loves this. Or the timing was off with the caterer. Like it's a holistic thing. So that's step number one. Step number two, I look at the survey data. Every single one of my clients, and if they don't, they get in trouble. Not real big trouble. They have to send out a survey to their donors, to their attendees afterwards. We have to know things. Nonprofits spend, historically, not so much, they spend a large time guessing what people want, but not really knowing what people want. But we have all these incredible tools at our hand. Like we have surveys, we have text, they can come right to your phone. I want to know, what did you think? Did you feel inspired? Did you give? If you didn't give, why didn't you give? If you did give again, why did you give? And the nonprofit needs to have all these data points. Okay, so I use that data, and then it's part of a big holistic thing, but I work with my nonprofits for like 9 months. So I will talk to the board and say, okay, you want to get to $100,000, $150,000, here's what we're going to have to do. This is going to get me in a lot of trouble, but I'm going to say it. Nonprofit employees have very high turnover. And there are a lot of them who just are scared of fundraising and they don't want to do the hard, scary stuff. And so they do it exactly the same every year. They spend months and months and months gathering silent auction items, months and months and months, making sure people pick them up, billing them, getting live auction items, and planning a gala. But the real work happens, as you know, before the event. So for example, the first thing I would do if I was trying to move a client past the $100,000 mark is I would say, let's look at all our auction items and let's take one out. And now let's look at who bought that auction item for the past 3 years and let's call them. Sometimes I make the call. Sometimes the nonprofit development director makes the call. I don't like to make the call, but sometimes I'll do the first one to show them how to do it. And I'll say, hi, Mrs. Smith, I'm your auctioneer this year. Remember me? It was so nice. Thank you for your generosity. How did that trip to Spain go? Whatever. And then 95% of the time they say, oh, I didn't use it. Okay. Most auction items end up unused. Whole separate conversation about consignment. I don't believe you should pay for consignment until you're going to use it. Personal opinion. And I'll say, look, we're taking out the trip to Spain out of the auction this year. I hope you will take your $5,000 that you spent on that trip to Spain and you will raise your paddle as our lead gift in the fund need. And usually they say, oh, I would love to do that. And there you go. Now we're $5,000 closer. And then I call the second person. I'd like you to be our lead gift. We already have one committed. Will you match and get us to $10,000? Oh, absolutely. I didn't use that trip to Tahoe. Ding. And once you get started, it's very easy to continue. Sometimes just picking up the phone and having that conversation is terrifying. That's the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do is I would raise all the silent auction prices. I control all those in my my clients. I set all the prices and I set all the increments. Because if you use auction software, it sets you too low and it bids you up too high, in my opinion. So I do that. I would do that. And then the last thing I would do is I would have a match for my fund in need, but I wouldn't base the match on dollars or numbers of paddles. I would base it on entire room participation. We want to get to 95% participation in this room. And if we do, you make a gift at any size, a donation, raise your paddle. We can unlock this, I call it magic money. You can unlock the magic money. But that's what I would do to start pushing people over the line, because it's horrible to say, but development directors who work for nonprofits, they move jobs like every 2 to 3 years. And most of the time that's because they were either like not successful or let go, or they just need a raise. I'm going to get roasted. I am lucky enough to have some of the best development directors in the world as my clients, but I talk to ones all the time who I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot stick.
I think I think that is a fabulous answer, and I think that is why this podcast exists. And I'd like to invite you back for future podcast episodes, and we can talk behind the scenes about content and things like that. We went into this one almost completely unscripted. I'm going to say we did it completely unscripted because
absolutely
we haven't spoken for what, 3 weeks, a month, or something like that. When we set it forward. So I want to thank you for coming on today. I am fresh out of questions. If you have anything else that you would like to impart, something that's burning from the conversation that we've had, but I always like to close out with, I've got Abra Annes, obviously a very good professional at what she does. So if there's anybody out there within my listening voice that says that's the professional I need, how do they get a hold of you, Abra?
You can go to my website, auctionsgenerosity.com. My business name is Generosity Auctions, but that was taken. Or you can find me on YouTube, and all my contact information is there. You just look up Abra, ABRA, and the word auctioneer, and you'll find me.
She has over 100 different videos. One of there's a few of them out there, but she is the first one that I saw probably 5-6 years ago that gives away free content, that gives away things that will help your benefit auction, whether or not you hire her or anybody else for that matter. She's got tips and tricks and not tricks, tips and methods and step-by-step, broken down into 3-minute videos, 5-minute videos, 15-minute videos that are completely free, and a lot of respect for Abra. As a matter of fact, I think I'm up to 30, and that's in large part because of you. We recognize that there's like 1.5 million nonprofits out there that would like to raise money. Not all of them do benefit auctions. Not all of them fundraise. They have to fundraise, but not all of them are ever going to use an auctioneer. And even if all of them did want to use an auctioneer, there's not enough auctioneers out there to go around. So very, very important work, whether or not we ever get paid for them. So that is our time for today. I'm Shawn Dostie, the charity ambassador. This is Abra Annes of Generosity Auctions, and we are America's Fundraiser podcast, and saying have a great day, and may your next benefit auction be the best ever.